It's so fascinating. You may hear a lot about it because you have a daughter. So you're a working woman. I'm a working woman. You're a working woman. And then you have all these women who aren't. And they try to justify why you shouldn't be working because they're not. I literally had a woman tell me there was a stigma to working. And I said, no, sweetheart, there's a stigma to stupid.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yes. Hey, Warners, welcome to another episode of The Women Your Mother Warned You About.
The podcast that makes business sexy again.
I'm Gina Trimarco, Master Sales Trainer at Sales Gravy.
And I'm Rachel Pitts, mommy, wifey, mortgage loan officer at U.S. Mortgage, and fitness fanatic.
I feel like my intro is so short, and yet at the same time, it feels really good for it to be so short.
I would love for mine to be shorter and working towards that.
I mean, I'm okay. I'm a dog mom. Okay, there's that. Sales trainer and dog mom, Gina Trimarco. Oh,
that's okay. It's good to be one thing. I have tried so long to be one thing.
Oh my God, I love being one thing. It makes my life so much more fulfilling. Speaking of having a fulfilling life, we're excited today for this episode with our guest, Leslie Montanile. I love...
That's not it. Montanile.
Montanile. See, I knew I was going to fuck it up, so there you go. Montanile. So Leslie is a matrimony attorney, and we touch on that for a little bit, but she's got just a really interesting story, and like she was trying to like not tell her story. We're like, no, finish telling your story, because she's starting to talk about The Devil Wears Prada and working in an environment like that. And if you've seen the movie, you understand.
I'm totally watching that.
Maybe my gosh. Tonight. You have to watch it. It's such a good movie. So I think this is a really cool episode, hearing just her journey of becoming an attorney. I'm just going to leave it at that. Rachel, what did you think?
I wrote down something while she was talking, and I didn't actually comment on it at the time, but I found it really interesting because she mentions in the interview that when she was a child, she had this desire to be an actress. And then she talks about creativity and the fact that she utilizes her creativity in her law practice.
Yeah.
And it made me just write down, creativity is not limited to artists. You can use it in any job.
Yes.
And so if you're somebody that has artistic pursuits, then listen to this episode and consider that, you can use creativity in any job that you're in. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I love that, because that's something that I'm in the middle of spinning up a new course for Sales Gravy, and it's a longer version of one of my shorter courses. And I have an entire session dedicated to creativity, because creativity helps us solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's like tap in, like the most creative people are also the best salespeople, by the way.
Think outside of the box. And Ms. Leslie Montanile is definitely an attorney who thinks outside of the box, and you guys will really enjoy her. So let's have a listen.
We are super excited to have Leslie Montanile. I love that name. Leslie Montanile, an attorney, on our show today, talking about all the things when it comes to divorce in business, when you have a business, divorce during a pandemic, different things that you can do to get your life back on track, and learn more about Leslie. So Leslie, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in a little bit and learn a little bit about you. Just a quick little background of like, who is Leslie?
First.
Yes.
Let's ask her before she tells us about herself.
Yes.
First,
what was I thinking?
Leslie, do you consider yourself a woman your mother warned you about, and why?
Oh, I thought a lot about that question. I did, because, there's two ways to look at that. There's a positive and a negative. Are you the woman your mother didn't want you to be and warned you not to be like?
Ooh.
Or are you the woman that your mother always said you could be and warned you about that too, because maybe you were afraid to take that road because they held you up to a really high standard. And It's a warning. And it goes both ways. I would say that I'm not like those women my mother might have warned me about, because my mother, I have to say, always held me to a really higher standard and always believed I could achieve whatever it is I set my mind to, and steered me away from those women and told me to stay away from them and not be like those women. Those are the women my mother warned me about. Ooh. So I find that really fascinating, because I've worked for several women that my mother might have warned me about, and how you deal with women in the workplace.
What were those women like?
Powerful, smart, savvy, but very guarded about their position, because as we know, the glass ceiling still very much exists, and certainly 20 years ago existed. And those women, even though they wanted to befriend you and have you on their team, also was afraid that maybe you would take what they had worked to achieve, because the positions were limited. So there might have been one woman to 40 men in the same position. So it's fascinating. And it's still out there. You know, women really need to push past that and realize we all have something special to bring to the table. And most women want to work and be with women because they want to learn from them, especially because women can be mothers, wives, daughters, sisters, friends, colleagues. We have something special that men don't. And we have to learn how to propel each other forward in relationships, and relationships that become undone. So I think we have to be each other's teammates more than best friends, and really be honest with each other and honest with ourselves when we succeed. When we see younger women coming up, are we going to let them in to that club and not be afraid that they might actually take our position? You know what? If they do, we've done our job.
It's a mindset thing for sure.
Yes.
Right. I've definitely worked with women who saw older women who saw me as a threat. Yes. And then they made sure that they held me down, that I couldn't advance because of their own insecurities. And it was heartbreaking. Exactly.
Because you probably gave your heart and soul to your position and your job at the time.
Well, not only that, I gave my heart and soul to that woman, thinking of her as a mentor.
Yes. And then they turn out to be your worst enemy.
Right.
Yeah.
They become the nemesis, and that's like a breakup in itself.
Yes. I mean, I like to refer to it as The Devil Wears Prada.
I love that movie.
Love that movie.
I've never even seen it. I need to watch it.
Oh my gosh.
It's a must. It's a must see. It's a must see.
This is a movie that I can actually watch over and over again.
It's a must see. It's very subtle. And I will say, in my younger career, I did experience working for someone similar. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating. So
let's hear about that. Tell us your story and how you got where you were, and some of those positions, if they were all in, law firms or other types of employment where you encountered those women you just spoke of.
So I'm a lawyer. I did not take a straight road to getting to law school, but that'll be in my book, which will be coming out, which we can talk about later.
So it'll be around when Gina's book comes out, hopefully.
Shut up.
Excellent. I love that. That'll be terrific. So I graduated law school, went out to California because I had family there, waiting for my bar results, got my results, and I had an uncle who said, "Why are you going back to New York? Stay in my beach house rent-free, live here." I said, "Okay." So I went and I took my resumes in hand, being this little New Yorker, and I picked out a building I wanted to work in, and I worked my way down from top to bottom, introduced myself, all excited that I had passed the bar. And by the time I got back home, I had 6 phone calls. So I had options. So I turned around, went back, and realizing and knowing through my law school experience, I was not the blue suit type. I'm not a conformist. I don't like to be in a box. You know, I like to think outside the box within the confines of the law, that I was not going to really fit into the traditional law firm type of mold. And also, I didn't want to get stuck in a law library. So this sole practitioner who was a prestigious matrimonial lawyer offered me a job, and I just said yes, because I was like, this is it. He's going to teach me everything from soup to nuts. And he did. And working for that sole practitioner for a year really showed me some of the deep inner workings of matrimonial law and people and sadness. It really took a hold of me because I really love to work with people and I love to help them. And I like to see the better side of people, so to speak. And I loved it. But after a year, I was alone. I'm living in LA. You know, it's a driving city. You're not meeting anybody. And if you're working for a sole practitioner, you're not mingling with other young people. So having friends in the business, I'm like, I want to go work for William Morris, you know, and be an agent.
Ooh.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, but you have to push a mail cart. I'm like, okay, I'm in. I want to learn from the ground up, because it doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or, you know, NYU or some other law school. If you want to work at William Morris, you're pushing a mail cart. You know, you're not special. You start at the bottom. Anyway, an opportunity came along for me to work for Carla Singer Productions, which produced True Life Stories of the Week. With a lot of the Charlie's Angels, like Jacqueline Smith and Kate Jackson. They produced these movies, one particularly about Donna Yelovich, who killed her husband, who had roid rage. Well, she didn't kill him. She had someone else kill him. But beside the point is, I learned a lot in that year working for this woman, and she was wonderful, but there was someone in between us. I was just a production assistant, a lawyer, production assistant, running off scripts, counting, having the time of my life. But she had a writer, a development person in the middle, and I saw how she treated her. It was very different. And I felt that it was a little uneven. But, you know, I figured it's Hollywood. You know, this is just the way it goes. In any case, after a year there, the earthquake hit in 1994, and I found myself back really in New York. And ultimately, before going back into law, I had a job at NBC. And I got that job thinking that I was interviewing for a law firm, but it ended up being some temporary position, which then turned into this position where I affectionately say I work for the Devil Wears Prada. Yeah, very fascinating. And there's more to the story, but I don't want to take up all this time telling you my whole story, because I know there's other things your viewers and listeners want to hear.
But we're loving your story, and the way this show goes, we never know where it's going to go. So don't worry about that. I don't know about you, Rachel, but I want to hear about the Devil That Wears Prada.
So here I was working in what was called broadcast standards, where we censor television programs, which is different today because now we have cable and all these other things, and we don't censor programs anymore. But back then it was a big deal. And, you know, it's all the shows that are still on reruns, and you read the scripts of Law and Order and Homicide and everything that comes out, and programs get censored, commercials get censored, believe it or not. And I was working for one of the most powerful women in television at the time, because at the time NBC was the #1 network. And the ratings war was going on. You know, when you put on television, you see MAR, that was all happening at that time. Mm-hmm. And I had been interviewing for William Morris in New York City. And the day they offered me the job, the woman I was temping for came running out of her office and said, "You have to work for me, I need you," basically. And I figured, how could I go wrong? It's NBC. It's Rockefeller Plaza. It's 5,000 employees, #1 network. You know what I said to William Morris? "Thank you, I'll take this job." And I had just met my husband right around the same time. So I went and I worked for NBC, and I loved it. But what I learned there was that my boss was only as powerful as the ratings were. Because if the ratings were high, then the network was up. and the advertising was up and the dollars were rolling in. But if the ratings were down, then the whole thing comes crashing down. So long story short, first year was great. Next 6 months were great. But then all of a sudden the writing on the wall was that what was coming out. CBS was pulling ahead. NBC was falling behind. And I could see that I was never going to be able to move into the other department I really wanted to be in. And I could see that the woman I was working for really no longer had that same power. So in that first year and a half, when I got bonuses, I really did run to Prada, and we really did have meetings there for the fun of it. But I also realized I went to law school and I got this degree, and I wasn't fulfilling my calling of helping people, which ultimately ended up being women, because I was working in a corporation, which I was a number, and I didn't want to be a number.
Isn't that interesting? Because you started out with talking about working for this, one-man shop, and
Right.
You're like, oh, I want to be around people. And now you're around people and you're like, I don't want to be a number.
That's right. And I didn't want to be a number. And I also realized this, ladies, when you work for someone else like that, they have complete control of your life, your health insurance, your salary, your disability, your perks. And all of a sudden, one day, they can just say, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Or in the words of Meryl Streep on The Devil Wears Prada, that is all.
That is all.
Well,
That
and
is
it's a tricky situation because I imagine you were making pretty good money. Is that correct?
I was.
So when and there's a lot of people out there that can relate, and I've been going through this actually personally. Like, it's hard when you're like, I like this lifestyle and I like this money, but there's a greater purpose in your life, and it's a struggle, right?
It is, but you also have to realize, and this is what I realized, that if I did it on my own, because I was working 14-hour days. And I was working in a position that didn't require me to even be an attorney. And here I was now licensed on 2 coasts and Arizona. Story for another day. And I wasn't really contributing anything. And everything could be taken away. And I would rather hedge my bets on myself, because you know what? When it's on you, it's on you. Your success is based on what you put into it. So instead of putting 14 hours a day into someone else's world where it really wasn't appreciated, why not put it into my day? And I had an opportunity to go to work with a friend from law school who had started a practice which was building, but they couldn't handle the workload. And they didn't really want to hire like a secretary. They wanted someone who could also be a lawyer, go to court. And my husband, who I met in April and married in August of 1997. Yeah. And so we're together almost 24 years. And he's now my business partner of 20 years. Said, well, if you're so interested, go to that office and look on the shelves and see what kind of cases they have. And it turns out there were real cases on the shelf, and bingo, a lot of them were divorces. And I was like, you know what? Maybe this is just meant to be. One thing, I don't believe in going backward, and I believe that everything happens for a reason. So I embraced what was on those shelves. We moved out of New York City because the commute for driving was ridiculous. And my husband's commute to downtown ended up being shorter when we moved out of the city than when we lived in the city. And I started taking on these cases, and I was a full partner. I did not want to be owned by anyone. I came in with no salary into the company, into the law firm, and we were equal partners from the beginning. And right away, I just started working in the matrimonies and developing this reputation of being a lawyer who was reasonable, knew what she was doing, and was going to do the darndest for her clients, but certainly wasn't going to start throwing the first bucket of sand in the sandbox at people. And believe me, if you throw sand at me, I'm going to dump the whole thing on your head. But so
That's a woman your mother warned you about right there.
Right there. So I loved it. I was in control of my destiny. My work ethic, I was in my office at 7:00 because at 9:05 your phone starts ringing And now in our age now, the emails come in relentlessly. And if you give out your cell phone number, well, God help you. Yeah. So the texts come in. So I started developing this practice and realized, yeah, I really can do this myself. And when you start making money on your own and you're helping people and you're finding a better way, there's nothing that feels better or is more gratifying than knowing that you did it. I did it. I'm doing it. And I take that from Legally Blonde, from Reese Witherspoon, getting into Harvard Law, and she does it. And she really is this bright light, but she's different. Well, that's kind of how I look at myself. I like to be a bright light in people's lives, and I am different. I'm not the typical attorney. I'm so far from the typical divorce attorney because I am the divorce lawyer who believes in love. Now, does that mean...
I read that in your bio somewhere, and I'm like, ah.
Well, that doesn't mean that I think every marriage should be forever. I mean, look, some people get married in their 20s. If you get married in your 20s, it's a lot of work to grow together and be together to your 60s and 70s. And it can be done. I'm not saying it can't. But our world is very different. Everything's about instant gratification. We have social media. People think grass is greener on the other side until they get there and find out it's the same shade of green they just walked away from. People don't look at themselves,
Amen. Yeah.
So I also, obviously, this has nothing to do with if you're in a relationship that's abusive emotionally or physically, you should get out right away. But if you're in a relationship that's just gone stale, because, it takes two to tango, it takes two to do everything, it's gone stale, but you haven't really worked on it or confronted it, then the flame may not be able to be rekindled, or perhaps with work on both sides, it can be. And if it can't be, it's okay. It's really okay to look at a person that you took vows with and say, you know what? Maybe we've grown apart and we've grown into two different people. That doesn't mean we don't have a love for each other. We don't have to become enemies now.
Does she know me? What?
Maybe. But I've helped hundreds of women to this point. I have garnered a reputation of helping women. It's very rare for a man to walk through my door at this point. Yeah. And I really don't know why. And maybe it's because I like to level the playing field. Maybe it's because I inspire women to try and change their life. Some people come through my door and they're like, oh my God, he's having an affair. I'm going to get a divorce. And I'm like, no, you're not. We got to plan out your life first, because you don't even know the passwords. You don't even know where the money is. You don't know if there's life insurance. You don't even know what your mortgage payment is.
Eek.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I read that in one of your articles about, the 5 things you can do as you're, on your path of divorce. And one of those things that I believe was making a plan.
Have to make a plan. When people are hurt by the extramarital relationship, because that often happens, you really have to look in the mirror and realize it's not about you. Mm-hmm. That's just a symptom of whatever's been going on between the both of you. Now, the person who decides to step outside the marriage instead of just having the courage to just walk away, it's just mean. It's low. If you don't want to be with your partner, then leave. Just leave.
And the thing is, it's easier said than done, I think, for both sides, right? There's a variety of reasons why people don't leave and they stay, and they think it's less hurtful to stay than it is to leave. And really, it just takes courage to leave.
It takes courage to leave. It takes honest conversation. It takes digging deep into your own inventory. If it's a financial reason, if you're both unhappy, then I think that both mature adults can come to the conclusion that we can figure this out because we both deserve to be happy. Tomorrow's not promised. We all have one life to live. Definitely not better for the kids. People make that mistake all the time. It's not.
Well, and it's hard for people to be honest. Let's be honest. It's hard for people to be honest. And having been a person who has been married, I got married in my 20s.
Yeah.
I got married in my 30s, and I got married in my 40s.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But my first was an abuse situation, so that was done. The second one was a long-term marriage, and we have a child together. And when I was the one that decided to leave because it was not happy. The first thing that when I told him that I was leaving, the first thing he said was, "You're sleeping with Dr. Dan," because it was one of my clients at the time.
Oh,
and
I
I'm
remember
like,
that.
I'm not sleeping with Dr. Dan. Dr. Dan has 4 kids. There's no. I like Dr. Dan to pay me. But anyways, my ex assumed that it was an affair, but it wasn't. It was just, like you said, Leslie, a choice that before I stepped out, I wanted to separate us. And we're actually great friends now because I made the choice that it's the father of my child.
Correct.
And it's something that's so important. I'm sure you run into this all the time. I made the choice that I knew would get ugly. Divorce is not pretty, no matter how great the situation is. It gets complicated. But I just made the choice that Roxy, our daughter, would not feel uncomfortable having both of us at her wedding, that we could communicate if something happened to her. And we actually get along really great now. It took some time, but it's so great.
Of course, people have to heal from a breakup because whoever leaves, the person that's being left or feels they're being left wonders, what did I do? Was it my fault? They wonder, they become insecure for a while until they realize it's really not about them.
Right.
I
mean, and if you're with somebody for any extended period of time, whether it be a year or in my case, 10 years, there's good times. It's not all I hate this person. Like otherwise you'd have left a long time ago.
And you wouldn't have married them.
That's right.
You wouldn't have married them in the first place. And what you said is so important. When you have a child, your child is forever, which means whether it's, bar mitzvahs, sweet 16s, confirmations, weddings, grandchildren,
illness,
you're together. You will be together. And what do you want to teach your children? And how do you want them to be secure and have self-esteem and their relationships going forward in the future? They learn from mom and dad. And if mom and dad can work through their differences, and if that means mom and dad have to have 2 separate houses, the love is still there. It's just a different level of love. I have clients that have mega blended families, mega remarried, children on both sides, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they're all together. Now, I'm not going to say it didn't take work, but it took the maturity of one spouse, and it all depends on where the hurt comes from. And look, if you're a woman who's been married more than 5 years, more than 1 year in a relationship, let's face it, men are from Mars. I'm stealing this. Women are from Venus. We are very different. Okay. And women who give up what they've wanted, their dreams and goals, to be the primary caregiver in the relationship, to be the, primary, household person, even if they have a career, but they've scaled it back or changed it. We give up a lot. I don't know one woman that hasn't said, you know what, I'm leaving up here. I'm going to leave and leave them all. Not because I don't love them, but because what about me? Where am I in this shuffle? So many women get lost. So many women lose their way. And they forget who they are. They become Patty PTA, Cindy Chauffeur, soccer mom Sally, and the do-it-all, but they forget about themselves. And then their spouses get used to the fact that their partner, their wife, the person they married before children, was an independent individual. Yeah. And they don't always want them coming back to that individuality. it's very complicated. So when I meet women who have given up careers or gone to school or had a dream and they have little children and their husbands go to work and they're supporting them and they have this window of time, like 3 or 4 hours in a day, I always say, well, what are you doing in those 3 or 4 hours? And I'm not being condescending. I'm not talking about the laundry time or the dinner time. But what are you doing in those 3 or 4 hours, right? Instead of going to the gym, maybe you could be furthering your education. Maybe there's something you've always wanted to do. You know, there are a lot of online classes. There's a lot of community colleges, whatever it happens to be. Maybe you want to work in the, pediatrician's office or the orthodontist office. I know a woman, 6 children, 6. She started when she had baby number 1. She runs the entire place now. She didn't work full days back then. There's so many things women could do for themselves to evolve from the careers they had that they can't have when they make a choice that they're going to be the one to stay at home. And it still often is the woman, unless she is earning far more than the man. You know, here in the suburbs, that picket fence is alive and well, my friends. And it isn't white with spaces between it. Now it's like stone walls that you can't even see through. And you got to wonder what goes on behind those walls.
Hey, everybody. You know, the greatest gift that you can give to someone is something that's intangible and free. So the greatest gift you can give us is to give someone you care about the gift of our podcast, somebody that might need to listen to our podcast to get some of the awesome knowledge that you got from us or one of our fantastic guests. So share the love today, post on social media, or just send an email with a link to our website, womenyourmotherwarnedyouabout.com. Now back to the show.
Well, let's shift a little bit. I'd like to shift a little bit to your career path and how you've branded yourself. You do a lot of media appearances. So from a branding perspective, how did you, and I think it's kind of cool because you started in law and then you got a little bit into entertainment and NBC. And so you got a taste of all of that and you do a lot of appearances now. How did that shift for you? How did you make that happen? Because that's a really big piece on branding and selling yourself.
So, truth be told, as a child, I wanted to be an actress.
Truth be told, we all did.
And I did do a lot of acting. And at the age of 14, I had an opportunity to audition for Annie on Broadway in a closed audition, which is in my book. And my mother said no. And I'm not going to reveal why at this moment.
It's in the book.
It's in the book.
Dang it.
Okay. But she said no. And I felt like, oh, my mother doesn't feel I'm good enough. Just so you know. Mm-hmm. That really wasn't the truth. That had nothing to do with it. So fast forward, I always say my creativity went into hibernation, but never went away, which is what I do as a matrimonial lawyer. I find the most creative way to get my clients what they want within the confines of the law. I'm always thinking outside the box. But in 2010, I started writing about women, motherhood, my own experience. I have a son, having a husband who was a partner. And I started writing tidbits for women to help them. And men, some men, there are plenty of stay-at-home men now too, and to help them. And I started putting it out on the internet around 2013 in AskLeslieLawyer.com for free. And I'm sure some of my colleagues didn't really appreciate that. But really didn't care, because I felt that before you knocked on a lawyer's door, you should do some research. And the research wasn't necessarily available out there from a divorce lawyer telling you the truth about how it really is, and what you really needed to know. So I kept putting out articles, writing for different venues. My mother being my biggest cheerleader, of course. And moving forward with that shift, I was approached at one point by 2 producers to do a couple of reality shows based on divorce, but they wouldn't have really been authentic and they would have been short-lived and it wouldn't have been my message.
Good for you.
Okay. And there's a lot of people I know that would have jumped at it and can't believe that I didn't. But I knew deep down inside, I don't want to be a flash in the pan. I want to be, here down the road. I want to be a mentor, a guide. I want to be, someone that says, wow, she's lived a life like this and experience and have left a legacy behind that my family would be proud of, that I'd be proud of, that my mother would be proud of. When my mother passed in 2015, for me, that was a really big bump in the road. And I shut down my website for a while. I needed to take a step back and reevaluate. And I've been working away at a multitude of clients and divorces, helping women out of really horrific situations. And it took me almost 2 years to get back into the swing of things, revamp my website with a laser focus on really fulfilling my goals of writing my book and telling my story, getting the word out there, letting people know that there is a different way. We can do this. We can be better than we are. We can love better than we do. We can let go of what is not happening for us. We can leave the negativity behind and move forward and succeed in our world as women, wives, mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, aunts, and just colleagues, teammates, propelling forward women at their best, at their strongest. And my real message is whatever you do, do it from a position of strength, inner strength, and security, not from weakness.
And is this what the book is about?
Yeah.
Tell us more about the book.
Well, the book talks about my life as a child growing up and my parents, and how learning from them and learning things about myself, and having veered off the road, having had a very sick boyfriend from high school who ends up dying from cancer early on in college, how that took me maybe in an S and not a straight road, and how people will look at you from the outside and see an appearance and think they know the story. And that's what I experience here in the suburbs. The exterior. And I've taught this to my son, and I tell this to people, never, ever, ever judge a book by its cover. Covers are meant to entice and draw you in. But when you start reading between the lines, you might find a lot of fluff. You might find that you were fooled, which is often what happens in my world. So I have women who show up at my door, right? They're in the hottest jeans with the Birkin bag and, the windblown face, but they can't even write a retainer check. They have no rainy day money, or as I would like to say, sudden death fund. So people don't like the word divorce. Okay, so what if your spouse drops dead of a heart attack? Are you prepared? What if they get hit by a bus? Do you know where the key is to the vault, meaning the passwords? Do you know if there's enough money in the bank to cover your expenses, your life insurance, your kids, your college?
I truly believe there needs to be a marriage class before you get married.
Oh, I think that's a really good idea.
All that should be set up front and determined up front.
That's all on my website. That's all what I talk about. So that's what I've been bringing to the forefront. And I don't remember who picked me up first, but I did some radio, and from radio, I got some articles. Then I got another radio, and it's just some podcasts. I've done some wonderful podcasts. Like, this is a wonderful podcast for me. It was exciting. It's wonderful when someone reaches out and shares a vision that you share and has lived through that, and just sees a better way. I mean, isn't life full of enough ugliness? Why do we have to?
It's so interesting for me to sit here and listen to that, because I am the opposite. I wore the pants, especially in the marriage where I had my child, and Good God. I was just talking yesterday about when I had my daughter, and 4 weeks after a C-section, not only had to go back to work, but take over the job load of my boss who left the country, even though she had a 9-month window of knowing that I was going to have this baby. And like, that part of like, it's actually like the opposite for me. Like, oh my God, I wish I could have just been stayed home with my little child. Like instead I was working 6 jobs and, like it's so interesting because I controlled everything. So I think it just depends on what kind of woman you are as well. Cause I can't imagine there's no fucking way I would not know the passwords to the bank accounts.
Well,
no.
Amen to you, because I run my household, so I know.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you're listening and you're in that scenario, like take control now. Listen to Leslie, like open your own bank account and put $2 in it,
Yeah.
And start from there and put $2 more next week, like whatever you have to do, because there's like, it's definitely important.
It's interesting because I also, what was also flashing for me is when Leslie was talking about, the person who leaves versus the person who stays behind and how it affects the person who stays behind. And I'm like, please, because in the state of South Carolina, the only way you can get divorced is someone's got to leave for 12 months physically and live separately. And if you're begging your spouse to work out the marriage and they're like, no, I don't feel like it. And your last resort is to make a bold move and leave, hoping to get his attention. And then that doesn't work. But that's the state's way of getting you to reconcile, because moving out is the way to do it. So the person left behind, that might be not even realizing you left. It's I think, we talk about this all the time. Every divorce is different. No divorce is the same.
That's the truth.
Every divorce is different.
Every divorce is different. And I also find that because of the internet, you find the living room litigator who like to Google it. So they like to tell me my job, and I try to explain to them what your neighbor Mary got is because your neighbor Mary's husband, might have had millions of dollars, whereas your husband is negative.
Yeah.
So let's not compare. So every divorce is definitely different. But, it's so fascinating. You may hear a lot about it because you have a daughter. So you're a working woman. I'm a working woman. You're a working woman. And then you have all these women who aren't. And they try to justify why you shouldn't be working because they're not.
Sounds great to me. Let's do that, please.
I literally had a woman tell me there was a stigma to working. And I said, no, sweetheart, there's a stigma to stupid.
Ooh, yes.
Because if you're not going to work physically out of the household, then you need to be the CEO of the household. You need to manage the bills. You need to know where everything is. You should know where the money is. You also need to start putting away a rainy day fund, because you might have a spouse that's a big spender. They may already be diverting money and you don't even know about it. That happens.
It seems to me like if a woman allows, because I don't know, because I've never been there, if a woman allows the man to control all of the financials and all of that stuff, then you lose yourself. It seems like you might lose yourself, because then you're completely dependent and you're like asking for money. It's just so, I'm sure it's really common. I just
really
can't
common.
even.
It's really, really common. And it's hard to believe. I mean, look, you ladies have these great careers, and you've evolved and you've pivoted and you've done other things, and you keep going. You don't quit. So I evolved. I used to work like all day out of my house in my office. But as I had my son, I realized that he didn't really need me when he was teeny tiny, because he didn't really know the difference. But I knew as he got older, I might want to be around in the afternoons. Mm-hmm. And it really started with these snowstorms when he was like 7 or 8. So here are these snowstorms. My files are in my office. I can't get there. And the babysitter can't get to me. So that's when I said, okay, light bulb on, home office time. So I started to build a home office. Now my son's in college, but it gave me that freedom to be able to, okay, I could go to the office in the morning while he's in school, but then I could do all that like meat work where I couldn't be disturbed, from, 8 a.m. to 2, and then I could be home and I could be in my office doing the paperwork and other things that if he interrupted me, it wouldn't matter, but then I could be around to see what was going on. Because, kids, when they're young, at some age, some of them are already Googling. They're like looking things up on how to kiss girls, or whatever. They're watching television, so you want to be around. So I learned to evolve to do that. I also, at a point in time, realized that I was a boutique attorney. And what I mean by that is I never have more than 10 clients ever at one time. Maybe around 7, because I realized that I give you this one-on-one attention. I don't have my paralegal call you or my secretary call you. I call you. I do all the work. So what I decided to do for myself was raise my rates, decrease my volume, and give you Class A personal service. That also allowed me more time to be with my family because I was managing a smaller load, but more complex cases. Complex financials, like find the money, honey, kind of thing.
I love it. This is a great learning lesson for our listeners when it comes to, because this podcast is so much about balancing business and life, business and life. And from a business perspective, whether you own your business or you're working in a business and you're in sales, really being able to niche and find what your specialty is and ask for bigger dollars for what you do and really own what your expertise is. When you really own your expertise, you can demand more money and work less. But first you have to know what your expertise is. So I think that is a really good learning lesson for our Warners. I think that's a really good nugget for them to take away. And it is almost time for us to wrap up this show. And so we've got a couple more questions, sure, some signature questions to ask you before we wrap up. So I'm going to have, so Rachel, if you want to ask those questions, and then we will wrap up the show.
So Leslie, how would you define the word sexy?
Sexy. There's nothing more sexy than a woman who can stand on her own 2 feet, control her destiny, and buy whatever she wants without asking permission from her significant other.
I love
That's sexy.
Amen.
I am
and you
sexy.
know what? The men think that's sexy too.
You better believe it. The right men do.
The right men do. That's right.
I mean,
That's
my
right.
husband does.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too. I had to go through a couple to get there. So second question, what is the best advice you've ever been given?
The best advice I've ever been given? Okay. It's very brief. Tomorrow is not promised. Live for today. Make it count. Make it count.
That's awesome. And while you were talking, Leslie, I was thinking, regardless of your scenario, it doesn't mean that if you're considering divorce, if you are a woman out there in a relationship, whether you're working or whether you're at home, if you're not happy, then use your creative powers to figure out what it is you need to change. Like, you don't have to stay stuck. There's a solution. And you can't just blame the other person in the relationship. You can use your creative power. I was thinking that as you're talking, that there's always
hit the nail on the head. Most of the time when women come to my office, they're really not unhappy with their spouse. They're unhappy with themselves. And they are stuck. That's the word. And they need to get unstuck. So I try to give them simple exercises to figure out what they would be doing. Let's just say their spouse got hit by a bus. They're not here. And, I don't use the word divorce. And they're not sure if they want a divorce, but what would you be doing? What is it that you gave up that you would be doing that would be so different today? Start with you. Maybe then when you figure out what makes you happy, maybe you start doing something about it. All of a sudden you look at your spouse differently and like, what, am I crazy? I don't want to get rid of this man. It's not even about him. It's usually never about the spouse. So that's very important point.
Super good. Last question. What advice do you wish you had been given?
Oh, I think the advice I wish I had been given about the women my mother warned me about, I think that not to go maybe all in with your heart when it's for someone else's gain. So, and I'm not talking about a marriage. I'm talking about when you're offered a position in a job, something maybe you've always wanted, be a little more conservative. I'm not saying don't do the job, but like I always went all in. I did whatever was asked of me. I worked 14 hours. I just believed you, because when you're an honest, giving person, you think everyone else is, and they're not. They're older, they're savvier, maybe they've had more experiences. Maybe
and everybody has their own agenda too.
Right, they have their own agenda. So maybe that's the kind of advice. I don't know if I would have listened. Might have been sitting in my brain, like, be a little more conservative and a little more reserved. Don't give them your best all up front. Give them hints of it. You know,
that's awesome.
Yeah. I think I would have appreciated that.
Love that.
I appreciate it right now.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the story I'll tell you later of Rachel. One more thing, and then we'll wrap up. What is the name of your book? You can't tell us? Oh gosh. Okay.
Not yet. But what I will do is I'd love to send you guys a complimentary copy as soon as it's probably in the next 4 weeks or so, 5 weeks.
Okay. So you have a published date?
We're working on that right now.
Okay.
So
all right.
I would love to.
Yeah, I want to know the Annie story.
Yeah. I think you'll appreciate it.
All the things. Okay, great. Well, it was awesome, Leslie, having you on our show today. And if people want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to do that?
They can definitely go to my website at AskLeslieTheLawyer.com. They can email me through the website or directly at Leslie@AskLeslieTheLawyer. That's the best way to reach me. You can learn a lot about our law firm. You can read articles. You can see videos. You can see, all the media that we've had and what's upcoming for us.
Awesome. That is so great. Thank you again. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with both of you. It's great. I hope we do this again soon.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're smart, because when the book comes out, we'll have to have you back after
Fantastic.
that.
I'd love to be
that'd be a great podcast. Talk about your book.
Excellent. All right. Well,
I know. Perfect.
We'll definitely be in touch, because I'll definitely get you those copies.
All right, great. Well, it's time to wrap up this show of The Women Your Mother Warned You About. I'm Gina Trimarco signing off. If you want more information about our show and to learn about us, you can go to womenyourmotherwarnedyouabout.com. And for me, you can visit me at ginatrimarco.com. And hey, if you really like this show or this episode, the best thing you could do for us is to share it out with someone else. Maybe there's a woman out there who needs to hear this particular episode today. Please go and share that.
And I'm Rachel Pitts. You can find me at thesinginglender.com for all your mortgage needs, and for your fitness needs at ultrafitlifestyle.com. And if you would be so kind to hop on over to iTunes and give us a positive, glowing review, it helps us spread the love to more people.
Awesome. Well, we're out of here. Bye, Warners.
Bye, Warners.
This really will get serious soon.
Yeah, it doesn't have to. I don't think anybody wants it to be serious.
Women Your Mother Warned You About is a Pod About It production. You've got a great idea. Let's pod about it. Visit podaboutit.com for more information.
Woof, woof. Monkey, monkey.